Hello, this is Mr. B. I want to go over a quick video that talks about independent and dependent variables and how to identify them when we're looking at a situation or we're looking at an equation. So let's take a look at some of our vocabulary. We're going to be using independent and dependent variable quite a bit, and also we're going to talk about relationships because these are all about relationships. What's the relationship between these two variables right here? What does it mean when we talk about relationships? So let's examine that word just a little bit more right here. Relationships are just a connection, that's it. So you know that you've got relationships with your friends right here. Of course, these are, you probably know these guys right there. They're friends. They are related in some way. A relationship is just a connection. You have friends, you have connections with your friends, and you have connections with the people in your family right here. You have a connection or a relationship with your parents, with your siblings, with grandparents and aunts and uncles. Even if you don't know them very well, you still have a relationship because there's a connection in there some way. Think about your classmates. You also have connection with your classmates. Even if you don't know them very well, you still have a connection with them because you're in the same class. And that is a relationship. A relationship is just a connection of some sort with other people, and it could also be other things. I'm really curious about this right here. Is this person holding a chicken leg right there? What is this, a hamburger? And what are these kids doing? I don't even know. Let's just kind of move on right here. Also, we can have relationships with things as well. So some things that we might have a relationship with that we may not think about too often is like this. So here are two things that are related. How much time you spend studying, which is your effort put on stuff, and the grade you receive or you earn on a test. Those are related because they're connected somehow. So these are the type of things we're going to be talking about with independent variables and dependent variables. So let's talk about the variables a little bit and the words independent and dependent. So what does it mean to be independent? Are you independent? So most of us would say, well, independence is not having to rely on somebody else, being able to make your own decisions, being able to do your own thing when you want to do it. So are you independent right now in your life? You might find that you are independent in some ways, and you're growing in your independence, such as your schooling, keeping track of your work and your homework and your assignments. You might find you're a little bit independent, at least in some ways, as far as transportation. You can ride your bike somewhere, you can walk somewhere. You may not be able to drive very far distances, so you might have to rely on somebody else to do that. But as far as getting around close by in your neighborhood, you can certainly travel around on your own. But of course, you might be dependent because you rely on somebody else for other things, like your food, transportation to faraway places, and things like that, for money, for things. So for a lot of those things, you might be still dependent, but you're growing in your independence. So now let's look at what it means in math and in science classes when we talk about an independent variable and a dependent variable. Independent variable is the thing that changes on its own. It's like somebody who can make their own decision. In a science class, an independent variable in an experiment would be the thing that a scientist or the person who's doing an experiment will change, make a change in something. That is the independent variable. A dependent variable is the thing that changes when the independent variable changes. It depends on the independent variable. So let's take a look at an example just to help kind of wrap our minds around these two words right here. I think football or soccer is a good example. So here is just a simple illustration to illustrate independent and dependent. All right, this guy over here, he has the ball and he is going to try to run to the other side. This guy is the defender and he is going to try to stop him. So tell me this guy can run anywhere he wants. He can run up here. What does the defender do when the guy with the ball runs up there? He runs up there. Okay, when the guy with the ball runs down here, what does the defender do? He runs down here. So who is independent, making their own decision, and who is dependent, who changes depending on the other person? If you said this guy was independent, you're correct. This guy is dependent. His changes and his moves depends on the guy with the ball. He's independent because he can move wherever he wants. he moves depending on where the independent moves. So we're going to be asking these questions while we figure out what is independent and what is dependent. So let's read some scenarios or situations here and determine which number variable is dependent and which is independent. So number one, we see the older Susan gets, the taller she is. The age of Susan is one of the variables, and the height of Susan is the other variable. Which one depends on the other? If you said the height depends on the age, how tall she is depends on how old she is, you would be correct. So the height is dependent and the age is independent. We can also say the age determines the height. So the independent determines how tall she's going to be. Let's look at number 2 right here. The more gallons of milk I have, the more quarts I have. So here we're starting with gallons. We would say gallons is independent. As soon as I figure out how many gallons I've got, then I know I can figure out how many quarts I have. The quarts will depend on how many gallons there are. Look at number 3. In the United States, we have a House of Representatives that makes laws, and we figure out how many people can come from each state based on its population, which is the dependent variable and which is the independent variable. Well, the number of representatives, I already said, depends on the population, so that's dependent, and the population is independent. A state can have as many people as it wants. People come and people go. That changes all the time, and it determines how many people are sent to the House of Representatives. 7. Let's go to this one. At a deli counter, the price of the order, it says here it's based on its weight. So the deli person weighs it, and that's how much it determines how much you're going to pay for that. Which one is dependent, which one independent? The independent variable will determine the other thing, the other variable. The dependent variable depends on the other variable. So if you said that the price depends on the weight, you're correct. The dependent variable is the price, the weight is the independent variable. The amount of ham or whatever it is you're buying can weigh whatever. The person behind the counter will weigh it and then determine what the price is based on that weight. All right, how about the last one right here? Jamie's dad is building a case for her toy figurines. The number of figurines is one of the variables, and how many shelves he puts in the case is the other variable. Which one is the dependent, which one is the independent variable? You can ask yourself, which one of these determines the other thing? Or you can ask, which one of these depends on the other thing? Does the number of shelves depend on how many figurines she has, or does the number of figurines she has depends on how many shelves Dad puts in the case? If you said dependent is the shelves, because it depends on how many figurines she has. If she has more figurines, Dad needs to buy more shelves. If she has few figurines, Dad needs to buy fewer shelves. Okay, well, I hope this helped out understand dependent and independent variables.